Scott, I'm so happy to have you join me today because we have been talking about red light a bit on the podcast, but we haven't done a deep dive. So you're my first expert to really go deep into red light therapy and the benefits of it. And I know just in the last year, I've been approached by lots of companies like, can you promote this for me? And being in the wellness space, it's really hard to decipher like which brands to go with. And but it's exploding. Like red light therapy, I feel like is exploding in the last year or two, even just since I've been doing interviews. So I'm really happy to have you here because I've heard you on other podcasts in the wellness space, and I know you know your stuff. So welcome. Why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about how you got so interested in red light therapy and how you got to be doing what you are now today?
Sure. Yeah. The most of my background actually is in corporate finance, so it wasn't even in biology or science or medicine or anything along those lines, or physics, I guess, which interfaces with red light therapy. But I was always very curious about health and wellness, and so I would, on the side, I would be reading any book I could get my hands on, listening to wellness podcasts, and just trying to architect a lifestyle that supported just more health, my health, and just more energy and vitality, and just higher quality of life. And so I red light therapy got on my radar. 2016, 2017. There was an article by Ben Greenfield in Men's Health where he was talking about using it on his crown jewels to boost testosterone. And at the time, I was just turned 40, so I was interested in what I could do to potentially boost my testosterone. And so I purchased a full body product and actually used it myself. And full disclosure, it didn't do anything for my testosterone. My testosterone stayed around, mid 500s. But I did notice that I was sleeping a lot better. And I just felt better when I was using the product on a regular basis. And so I actually, that was 2017-ish, and then I went to buy another product. I had a panel maybe about 3 feet tall. And it's kind of hard to do your whole body with just that. So I went back out to buy a second one, and I actually got sticker shock. The company that I purchased it from, the prices went way up, and I was in denial about it. I refused to pay when I just paid several $100s less not that long ago, and I said I wonder if I can come out with products that give you the light you need, but that are very very affordable. And it turns out that we could. And that was really the genesis for the company. Mid 2018, 6 months of prototyping, and we launched in 2019. And it's been a little over 6 years, and it's been a whirlwind. And we started with very basic products, but now we've got a full portfolio of products, all different price points, all different form factors. And it's been a crazy ride, but I'm super grateful because, it's just really nice to wake up every day and know that you're doing something that's genuinely helping people. And so that's how we approach things around here every day. And it's also just been amazing to watch the industry grow and explode, like you say. I do think it's gotten more in the zeitgeist the past year or so, where it's just more and more the regular person actually even knows what it is, and potentially even how it works, which we can talk about.
Yeah, yes. And I always love to meet the face behind the brand and know what the motives are and know what the story is. Because that does help people to decide, if they're hemming and hawing between one brand versus another, and they can hear the story behind it. That I think is really helpful. So yeah, well, let's start with square one. Like, because I know, like, I've had red light therapy devices for a while now, and my husband will still come into the room and be like, kind of eye roll. Even
That's
though
great.
he's
I love
like
that.
a biology chemist, like his background's in biology and chemistry, and he works in the med field. But he's very skeptical about everything. So let's start with square one. Like, what is red light therapy, and what is it doing when we sit in front of a red light?
Sure. So when we say red light therapy, we're actually talking about specific band of red and near infrared. So and usually refer to light by wavelength. And so generally speaking, 600 nanometers to 700 nanometers is red light. And then the near infrared that's used in our devices is typically somewhere between 700 nanometers and 900 nanometers. That near infrared is actually invisible, or sometimes I refer to it as invisible red light. And then And then, but zooming back on the electromagnetic spectrum, you've got ultraviolet light, which most folks know is high energy and you don't want to overdo it, can cause photo aging and burning. Then you've got visible light and you have infrared. Those are the three components of the solar spectrum. And ultraviolet light, again, high energy, 200 to 400 nanometers. And again, you don't want to overdo it, but it is important. UVB light in particular is important for vitamin D synthesis in the skin. So you do want moderate exposure, middle of the day, on a regular basis to keep your vitamin D up, in my opinion. And then you've got visible light, 400 to 700 nanometers, which starts out at violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange, red. That's Roy G. Biv backwards. And that's the light we can see. And blue light, people know, is important for circadian signaling, and so you do want some exposure midday to the blue light to tell your body that it is noon, but you want to avoid that after sunset because you don't want to confuse your body about what time it is because that can impact your sleep. And then you get up into the red part of the spectrum, and there's an interesting part of the spectrum between roughly 600 and 900 nanometers, which is referred to as kind of the optical window. And on Wikipedia, I think they call it the near infrared window of biological tissue, and you can look it up. And it's just this part of the spectrum where the wavelengths are long enough to penetrate in the body, but there's no water absorption. And essentially why that's important is that the water absorption that happens with the mid and far infrared, that creates heat. So that's why in a sauna, they use, far infrared sauna or sometimes mid infrared sauna. Those wavelengths of light are long, but they get absorbed by water and they literally heat the body from the inside out. So there's this narrow part of the light spectrum where the wavelengths are long enough to penetrate, but they're not getting absorbed by water or really other chromophores in the body. Chromophore is just a fancy word for a light absorbing molecule. Some of the big ones are melanin, hemoglobin, and water. So there's this part of the spectrum where you're getting no other chromophore absorption, so those wavelengths can get deep into the body and act on the mitochondria. And so that's step one, that the light actually has to be able to reach deep into the tissues. So what's happening when it's getting deep in the body and acting on the mitochondria? Well, by the way, that's the reason for the name of the company. Mito is short for mitochondria. Essentially, these specific wavelengths of light, they penetrate deep into the tissues, they act on the mitochondria, and essentially help the mitochondria make ATP, which is cellular energy. And the way that we think that this happens is that so in the fourth phase of cellular respiration on the electron transport chain, you have cytochrome C oxidase, which needs to bind with oxygen to finish making ATP or cellular energy. So cytochrome C oxidase is this a light absorbing molecule which is bouncing around inside the mitochondria, and it can either shake hands or bind with oxygen or nitric oxide. So what we think happens is these wavelengths of light come in, and when cytochrome C is bound with nitric oxide, it literally vibrates them apart. So now you have more free floating cytochrome C that's available to bind with oxygen and finish making ATP. And we kind of deduce this because when we, do these tests in the laboratory, we observe an increase in nitric oxide and an increase in ATP. So it kind of makes sense that would be the mechanism.
Okay. Yeah. And I know it's like when you start to look at the biology, it's like, oh, okay. And that's why it's so hard when people do ask, like, well, what's the benefit of red light? And you're just kind of like, but yeah, short answer is like increases ATP and helps enhance the mitochondria, which helps decrease inflammation on down the road. But yeah, your short answer.
Yeah, and really the simple answer. So I was on television a couple weeks ago, and it's like a 3-minute segment, so you can't get super deep into the biochemistry. But the interviewer just asked me, how does it work? And I said, look, basically it helps your cells make energy, and when your cells have more energy at their disposal, they do their jobs better. And so if the cell has mitochondria, which pretty much all cells in the body do, except for red blood cells, there's potential for them to benefit from exposure to certain wavelengths and certain amounts of red and near infrared light.
Yes. And I know, like I've said, I have used red light therapy for a while now, but I'll just, I'm 49, you start to get these little weird aches and like, you come home from the gym and like, my wrist hurts. Like, I don't even remember what I did, or my ankle, my heel is hurting. Like, I don't know what I did, but I swear you put that red light on there for about 20 minutes and it's like pain gone. I mean, I am a firm believer and these little like quirks that just like happen as I'm aging. I don't really know what happened, but I know that this is helping. Well, let's talk about our environment because our environment is so much different from what it was even 100 years ago. And the types of light that we are exposed to on a regular basis and the types of light that we are not getting a whole lot of because we're indoors all the time. And that's where, like, I am just, especially now, like we're recording this in the dead of winter for me anyway. I know you're in a sunnier place than I am, but it's dead of winter. I go outside as much as possible, but seriously, it's like minus 30-degree wind chills last week. It's wild. Um, so people aren't outside there, and we've talked about like screens being very high in blue light, and the sun, like you said, the sun has this full spectrum of light that people just aren't exposed to anymore. And so we're in this environment with high blue light. We're not getting a lot of infrared light. And I know some people are like, oh, well, I sit by a window, or, I'm driving in my car and I'm looking at the sun, but most of the UV, the red light, infrared is all getting filtered out. So let's talk about like how our environment has changed and how that's like really taking a toll on our circadian rhythm and our biology, and how we can use red light therapy to, maybe create a little bit more of an environment. I mean, I don't foresee us going back to being outside all the time. I mean, it's just not really in the cards for us as a species. It'd be really nice, but talk about how we can use red light and really just how our environment has changed so much and how it can be beneficial for us.
Sure. So first of all, you're spot on. The EPA did a study 20 years ago, and they concluded that modern humans spend about 93% of their time indoors. And that was 20 years ago, and now we've got Netflix and just all these streaming things and all the video games and Fortnite, which even I confess I play with my son once in a while. And just so many things that even more and more screens that are essentially drawing us indoors more and more. So I think it's probably closer to 95% now. Whereas like our ancestors were outside all day long, pre-industrial revolution, hunter and gathering or farming. And I think that we, in the wellness space, there's a lot of chatter the last few years about, vitamin D and the importance of vitamin D deficiency, which I think is part of the story, but it's missing the bigger picture because really, if you're vitamin D deficient, what that's telling you is that you're UVB light deficient, right? And because you need UVB, we evolved to have our skin be exposed to UVB light to make vitamin D. So it's telling you you're UVB light deficient, which means that you're sunlight deficient. So I think that so let's not think about vitamin D deficiency with tunnel vision. We should be thinking about it holistically. Your body's telling you need to get out in the sun more. But then further to that, what I would say is 54% of the light, that the energy that comes from the sun, is infrared. So if you're sunlight deficient, you are actually massively infrared deficient. And why does that matter? So at least with UVB, we know it's vitamin D, but with infrared, red and near infrared, we know that it's mitochondrial health and mitochondrial energy production. So if you want to be metabolic healthy, I do think one of the hacks is to spend more time out in the sun to the extent that you can, get more infrared light exposure. But if you can, it does make sense, in my opinion, to supplement with well-designed devices that can give you a high amount of red and near infrared light safely in a reasonable amount of time. Because again, the overarching story is we're basically indoors in front of screens all the time. And then to kind of take it to the next level, it's gotten worse over the past, say, 20 years, in the sense that, if you think about industrial revolution, we were still somewhat outside. And then, I think in the 50s, or even when I was growing up, I spent a lot of time outside. I mean, pretty much after school, I'd finish my homework, I'd be outside until dinner. And I just noticed different behavioral traits in my kids and other kids. But then the lighting that we're using inside has changed. So we used to use incandescents, and incandescents actually are a source of infrared, red and infrared. But this is where a lot of people get confused because we move to LEDs and they hear that LEDs are bad, and then they wonder like our devices use LEDs or our devices bad too. But the reason why LEDs are bad, quote unquote bad, is because the typical ambient lighting LED is primarily blue and green light. And essentially the way they're designed is it's a blue LED, and then there's another blue LED with what they call a yellow phosphor. It's a yellow coating, and that blue LED shines up through the phosphor and creates green light. It's kind of spread out between green and a little bit of yellow and just a tiny bit of orange and red. And all of that combined, our brain perceives as white. And it's super energy efficient. But there's no cyan and there's very little red and there's no infrared, right? So historically, even when I was growing up with incandescents, at least if we were inside, we were getting some exposure to infrared from that incandescent. But now, in the name of energy efficiency, we've completely done away. So we're even that much more deficient.
Yeah, and I was just listening to an expert on infrared light, and they were saying how like incandescent light do have a wide amount or a large amount of infrared light, and just simply switching your light bulbs back to incandescent light can be really helpful for circadian health and getting some of that infrared. And they were saying how like even though the LEDs are perceived as energy efficient, you are getting some warmth from the incandescent, and it's actually helping to heat your atmosphere, and it's giving you more energy as a human. So it's kind of a trade-off. So I've switched my light bulbs to incandescent wherever I can. And hopefully, because I know they were banned in some areas, I think that has been lifted. So hopefully, and I think it's just an education thing. Like I honestly think like some big corporations, I think, may have not had great motives behind certain things that have come to be in our environment. But I don't think LEDs, like when we were, I truly think it was just like the companies saw it was a better thing for us to go to more energy efficient. But
Yeah, they were thinking about energy efficiency
right.
and not about biology. And so
Mhm.
I'm trying to raise awareness on that. I do think that and this is kind of a side project I'm working on, is there a way that we can solve for the energy efficiency, but also be mindful of our biology? The wonderful thing about LEDs is you can essentially create any wavelength you want from them. And so I have a device from a company I invested in that's a narrowband UVB light, and I use it on my abdomen and my lower back for vitamin D. And those are LEDs. And then obviously our devices have different peaks, but we use 630, 660, 810, 830, 850 nanometers. These are different LEDs with different peaks. I mean, so we can create any composition of wavelengths we want with LEDs. Now, so I think that there's a huge opportunity there, and that's why I'm working on it, to create an energy efficient lighting source that's also mindful of our biology and kind of not trying to have the best of both worlds. Doesn't really exist yet. So I am a fan of incandescents. And I actually have a halogen up here that I use just to try to get a little bit of extra infrared, throughout the day. But even still, like it's kind of it's a small intervention because just it's not really going to solve for the massive infrared deficiency, but it's better than nothing. And
Right.
that's why I do think like getting a high quality red light device is going to make sense. And just using it 4 to 6 times a week for 10 minutes, you can really get a good dose of red and near infrared light.
Yeah, the heart of the matter is we just don't go outside enough
Right.
and utilize the sun. That's always perfect wavelengths at the perfect time of the day. Yeah, I think I have heard that human adults spend about 7 minutes on average outside, and it's usually going in and out of work. So
Crazy, right? And yeah, and the kids too.
yeah,
Somebody was saying to me that they did a study recently, and prisoners spend more time outside
yeah,
than a typical child, which
I've
is just terrible. It's terrible. So
heard that.
so we have to raise awareness, and hopefully we can the pendulum will swing back. But
Yeah,
in the interim, again, the a lot of the problems of technology, technology also has solutions on the flip side. Again, I'm a huge fan of the sun. That's why we moved to Phoenix in 2013. Is I was tired of the winters in upstate New York, and I wanted sun, and we get plenty of it here. Because I just was really starting to understand just how important it is for human health. But again, the good news is we do have technological innovation that can help supplement when you just can't get outside or if it's just minus 30.
yeah. Yes, this has been a really harsh winter. All right, so where do we start? Like somebody who doesn't have a device, really has no idea like where to start with the device and how long, how to approach using it, because there are definitely a lot of different price points, like you said, and going to a full body panel can be a bigger expense for somebody who's just starting to dabble in it.
I do like panels, in the sense that you get the most power, the most versatility, and the most durability. Our panels are built very well. You don't have one yet, but certainly we can get you one. And they just we use focusing lenses and we use very advanced heat sinks and we actively cool the LEDs. And so, properly cared for, it should last a really long time. It's
Yeah.
actually again, that's why we use LEDs in ambient lighting. It's not just the energy efficiency, but it's also just the longevity, because there's very minimal heat generated, so these things last a really long time. And so the panels, just the construction of them and the focusing lenses, it really allows you to deliver a really good amount of light to the body in a reasonable amount of time, and also very versatile. You can use it on your face, use it on your back, use it on your knee. Just move it around, and uh, and it should last a really long time because they're very durable. Now you have a belt. We've created devices and other form factors, and that's more about convenience and ease of use. My wife wears the belt around her abdomen when she walks on the treadmill in the morning, and it's just you can do that. It's battery powered. You can wrap it around her waist, and she can walk and surf the internet and walk and do red light on her abdomen at the same time. But not nearly as powerful as a panel, not nearly as durable, so not my preferred device personally. Um, so I would generally say get a panel. If you're only going to get one device, get a panel and get the largest within your budget, because I am a fan of, again, we're massively near infrared deficient in my opinion, so shining the light on as much surface area of the body as you can, to just get as much infrared light into your body as you can in 8 to 12 minutes a day would be my preferred way to do it, and that's how I do it. In my house, I have two full body panels, kind of front and back. I call it a sandwich. I stand in the middle, get the front and back of my body at once, and then here in the office we have a bed, so I will use the bed sometimes at lunchtime. So I'm super spoiled, obviously, when it comes to that. But I'm a believer, so I want to get the light on as much surface area as my body as possible.
Yeah, and I've heard of more and more like at wellness spas or gyms even getting the red light panels for people to use because the benefits are so massive. All right, so panel is the way to go, and they're not necessarily having to be mounted. They're like the smaller ones are more portable, correct?
We have desktop ones like this one I have behind me.
Yep.
This is I think 60 or 72 LED lenses. And this is great for the face and neck, but also again, like if you want to use it for your back or your knee or your ankle or under your desk while you're working, you can do that. And it's just a lot of light. So and we have panels like this that are as low as 250 bucks. This one's got a lot of bells and whistles, so this is 550. But we've tried to, as we've expanded our product line or our product portfolio, to have devices at different price points. So we have 250, 370, 450, and 550. We've got four different panels and all those different price points. So if someone is on a tight budget, 250 bucks, the light will last you many, many years properly cared for. As long as we don't recommend putting it in a sauna because of the heat, and don't put it in the bathroom because heat and humidity are not good for electronics in
Sure.
general. And so if you just keep it at room temperature in a dry environment, and you use it as directed for 10, 20, 30 minutes a day, if you have multiple people in the house, it's going to last a really long time.
Yeah, good. So you talked a little bit at the beginning of the podcast about how different wavelengths will penetrate different layers or deeper into the layers of the skin. So if, like in the winter time, I'm usually have at least two layers on, as you can see now, shirt, sweater, I have fleece lined pants. I mean, I'm always layered up in the winter. Am I getting the same benefit if I had a red light sitting on my desk with two layers on, like my thick clothing versus if I had nothing on, or is it better to have less layers if possible?
Definitely better to have less. We advise on skin, and if you're doing full body, and your birthday suit's ideal because, again, as much surface area as you can. But interesting thing is, so the red light won't go through clothing at all. So
Okay.
red light really just acts on the skin. It's not going to penetrate through clothing. Near infrared will go through bone. So it will go through some light clothing. Now you are going to attenuate it to some degree, so it's not ideal. So if you really want to get to maximize the time in front of the light, again, just the less you have between your body and the light, the better. But it is interesting too. I mean, even if you're going outside in the winter during the day, even with, moderate clothing on, you will get some infrared through that clothing. So it's better than nothing.
Yes, I know. I always tell myself when I that I have my down coat on over the, okay, well,
Well,
the
even your
infrared
face,
is penetrating.
your face and your head, the near infrared, like midday sun, I think 1.5% of that energy actually makes it to the brain. So you also have, some of it getting to your brain, which is your brain cells are super dense in mitochondria. And so, we want to get, I think it's actually a good idea to get a decent amount of infrared to your brain in terms of brain health.
Oh yeah.
So you'll at least get some to your face and to your brain.
I know. And I always tell myself, well, at least my eyes are picking up the signals, if nothing else. At least my body knows what time of the day it is. So we're typically seeing red and near infrared. And the near infrared is beyond the visible spectrum, correct? Like I just want to make people aware. Okay.
Yes, and we get that question fairly often. Why is my device not working?
Yeah.
So it's near infrared's invisible, and so those LEDs you can actually, a little tip is you can use your camera and take a picture of the device, and the camera will pick up the near infrared light that's coming off of it. But yes, it is invisible. You won't really see much with your eyes.
Okay. And how long, so if somebody does purchase a device, how long do you suggest using it? And I know like you want to kind of start a little bit, be a little mindful of where you're starting at, but once they're used to using it, what should we be looking at for time of use?
So generally speaking, when you look at the literature, you want somewhere between 6 joules and 60 joules. And so a joule is a watt per second. And so our devices are generally putting out about 3 joules per square centimeter per minute. And uh, so we usually just recommend about 10 minutes per body part because that's around 30 joules. And that's kind of in the middle of the kind of the dosing range, right? And it's just for regular maintenance. Now, the 6 joules would be like for a sensitive area of the body, like the eyes. So, we don't generally recommend our lights be used for eyes because they are super bright, and a lot of people are sensitive to light. Partially because they're spending so much time indoors, they're just not used to
Yeah.
being. It's like we live in modern caves. We're just not even used to bright light anymore, and so we are sensitive. So that's part of the reason. But anyways, the sensitive area, like the studies that are done on eyes, they're usually just a handful of joules, which is just a minute or two, like with our lights. And then, 60 joules would be something like an acute issue, like an injury maybe, or like a wound that you're trying to heal. You really want to get a really good dose into that area. But for general maintenance, we kind of recommend, about 8 to 10 to 12 minutes on 4 to 6 times a week is delivering a lot of light. And it's gonna just based on our experience, like it's just gonna be a good amount for most people.
Yeah, I love that you don't have to spend like a whole hour, like you don't have to sit there for an entire hour, like 8 to 10 minutes, 4 times a week, like you said, like that can bring so much benefit.
Very doable too. And it's relaxing. And I do think like, we're working on some things that we can do to stack with the light, but just take the 10 minutes and maybe do a meditation or breathe. A lot of people like to meditate, reset your nervous system. It's your 10 minutes of self-care, over and above like the benefits of the direct benefits of the light itself. There is something to be said for taking 10 minutes to just treat yourself to something that is good for you and just resetting, taking a break from the screens and the chaos of your day-to-day life, and just having that time. So, and I know that I look forward to that. And I have a very busy schedule. This business is growing, and I'm doing my best to manage the growth. And so my 10 minutes at lunch in that bed is like my escape from the
Yeah.
chaos, and I very much look forward to it every day.
I absolutely agree. And mine is deep breathing. Like that's like when I'm in front of the red light, that's my deep breathing time. And when I first started using it, I would try to like do work while I'm like, why am I doing this? And then it's hard to see any of my work anyway, because it's right in my face. So let's just use this for some downtime for deep breathing meditation, whatever it is that you love to do. But let's talk about the timing of it and when the best time to use this. I get this question a lot, especially as I talk more and more about circadian health and sunlight exposure and trying to do certain things while the sun's out and trying to abstain from certain things when the sun's not out. But is it best to use red light therapy while the sun is out? Because I know a lot of people ask me, like, they might be at work until 4:30, 5 o'clock, and like the days are starting to get longer. But in Wisconsin, like it was dark by 4:30. And so they're like, oh, is it okay to use my red light when I come home? Because the sun's already down, and I don't want to disturb my circadian biology, or I want to use mine before I go to work, but the sun's not up. So are there certain parts of the day that are best to utilize that? Or in your opinion, is it just like getting some is better than none?
Oh, yeah. So it's a tough one. There's no real definitive answer on that. When first used to get asked that question, I used to say, when I used like to use nature as a guide. So I'm kind of thinking the same way you are. Like I do think that it's probably ideal to use it when the sun is up, even though there is no blue light. It would be abnormal to be exposed to a really high amount of light energy after sunset. I mean, we would have been building fires, which,
Right.
by the way, fire is primarily red and infrared. But how intense would that be? And so I like the idea of doing it anytime during the day. And I don't know that because anytime during the day when the sun is above the horizon, you're getting exposed to infrared light.
Yep.
I used to say maybe it would be best to do it around sunrise or sunset because on balance, those times of the day are primarily red and near infrared light, and there's no UV or even short wavelength visible light. And that's why, the sun can be orange or red at those times because the other wavelengths are filtered out. So that's all that we see. And so but then I changed my tune and I said, really, I think any time during the day is going to be fine. And also, again, I think generally speaking, is it better, rather than splitting hairs about when the best time is, like just do it when you know you're going to be able to do it versus just as a practical matter, right? So if lunchtime is the only time you can do it, rock it out. Or if first thing in the morning is the only time you can do it, it's better than not doing it at all, right? In my view. So
Yeah, that's kind of the same answer about exercise, right? Like, should I do it in the morning? Should I do it at night? Like, it's better to get some than
right.
than none, that's for sure. All right, what else here? Okay, I do want to ask you about this because, like I said, I'm starting to get more companies approach me, say, "Oh, will you try a red light therapy device and promote it for us?" And as a consumer, like, yeah, I know the benefits of red light, and I know a lot about different lighting and that sort of thing, but I wouldn't know what to look for as far as what makes a device that I don't even know if I want to say better or higher quality. Like, what should we be looking for when we're purchasing a device? And I just had a friend text me yesterday, what red light do you recommend? And she's on Amazon. I'm like, ugh. I don't know about going on Amazon. Like, and I sent her
Tough.
my product recommendations, and yours was on there with the code. But how can we as consumers protect ourselves against not less quality kinds of red light therapy devices?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say, in my view, just having been doing this for 6 years, the industry has come a long way. The quality is much better than it was when we first started. I mean, there's still a lot of junk out there, in my opinion. Um, but but there is no like standards association. We were actually thinking about potentially trying to form one with some of our competitor companies that we know are doing things pretty well to set actual standards and have like some sort of certification or seal of approval. It's kind of in the works. But in the interim, what we try to do is we try to have very high standards, and so we independently test our devices at a laboratory. I mean, these are very difficult to test the actual total power output. You really have to be done in a controlled environment with special equipment in a laboratory. So all of our panels are tested, and we actually share that. We're very transparent, so we share that on our site. Like every single panel, every single size, we share the test data. And so we know the joules that are coming out of that thing at 6 inches. And so we can and also we can, the wavelengths too, because so the industry's come a long way. So you have a lot of companies using different wavelengths or claiming that they're using different wavelengths. But obviously, whether or not they have good quality control and if they're actually getting the wavelengths that are advertised, if they're not properly testing with a spectroradiometer or an integrating sphere test in a laboratory, you don't know if you're actually getting what's advertised. And so it's unfortunately there is no, it's this industry is still a little bit kind of like the wild, wild west, and there's no standards association. But I would look at years in business, I would look at independent testing, and I would really steer toward a panel for if it's only going to be your own device, and the panel should be they should use focusing lenses and be actively cooled because you really can't get the power that you or the light intensity that you should have if you don't have focusing lenses and active cooling. I mean, that's kind of like, that's just where the tech is. Maybe, at some point, and we're actually working on a couple things where we're trying to make a super thin panel with the power outside, because our panels are kind of thick. I mean, they're almost 3 inches thick. It's because we've got the fans in there and we've got the drives and the active cooling. But really, that's where the tech is. And so if there's a panel on Amazon or something that doesn't have active cooling or doesn't use focusing lenses and it's made of plastic, it's not going to be, where it should be. So I would say panels, active cooling, independent testing, and then years in business, because again, properly cared for, it should last many years. But hopefully the company will be around if you do have a warranty issue. And so I'm super proud of. First of all, it's very rare that our devices go down, but customer experience is super important to us. And so if people have problems, we just replace the device. We don't even do repairs. We just get you a new one.
Yeah, good to know. Well, that at least helps and points people in the right direct or in a direction and what to even start to look for. So I know earlier we were talking about how red light really is just helping the mitochondria. Going through. You did a great job going through the biochemistry, explained it a lot better than I could. But people who listen to this podcast struggle a lot with blood sugar issues, weight issues, hormone issues. A lot of women in perimenopause, menopausal years in kind of that time span of life. Is there anything that you want to expand on or any studies you want to expand on that show like improvements in blood sugar, metabolic health, weight loss, even anything in those realms that we should know about?
It's interesting because we get the weight loss question fairly often. And as I kind of alluded to, I mean, my wife uses the belt on her abdomen when she's walking on the treadmill in the morning. And there's some data. There are a couple devices which are actually FDA cleared where they can specifically say it's for weight loss. And those devices, like if you read the literature, the way they describe what's happening is the light is going into the fat cells and it's actually making the fat cells porous, and some of the lipids are leaking out of the fat cells into the bloodstream. But you really need to do something with that energy, otherwise it'll just get deposited back. So it makes that energy more available to be used, but then you really should exercise or strength train or something to after. So if I were going to use a device for weight loss, I would probably do it fasted in the morning. This is me because I'm healthy and I can do fasted exercise. So please check with your doctor on any sort of diet and exercise regimen. But I would do it fasted, red light, and then exercise after the red light is how I would do it. And I would actually use the device directly on the problem areas. There was one study that was done. It's really interesting. They did a study, and also again, as a standalone, I really don't think red and near-infrared light's going to do much for weight loss. But when paired with a diet and exercise program, I think it can enhance the benefits of a diet and exercise program. And there was one study where they did exactly that. They had one group which was diet and exercise only, and the second group which was diet, exercise, and near-infrared light. And they used actually similar to the belt you have these near-infrared pads on the problem areas, and they saw more weight loss in that group. But interestingly enough, they also saw improvements in insulin sensitivity, which I was like, oh, that's interesting. And so what is the mechanism? Is it just the increased mitochondrial activity, and you're just having more efficient cells, just more metabolically healthy cells because of the exposure? That's the like general hypothesis of why that would happen. So that's a really cool study. But again, I would never suggest just using it as a standalone. I mean, even that study, again, both groups had diet and exercise, and I think that's a kind of a necessary prerequisite for weight loss.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know when I'm able to, when it's warm out, I eat outside whenever possible. And I tell my following and my community to eat outside whenever they can too. And I know that there was a study, I think it was with indoor red light therapy, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong. I could be remembering incorrectly. It could have been UV light. I think it might have been UV light actually, but where there was like enhanced glucose uptake by like 37% when people were under UV light
Amazing.
versus, yeah, yeah. So I'm like, go
Yeah.
outside and eat your meals. I mean, it's so much more calming, relaxing, and you get the benefit, you get a lot of benefits, glucose enhancement and insulin sensitivity enhancement too.
Yeah,
Um,
and I mean, there's studies, it's very fascinating to me. There are studies about like changing the positive changes in the microbiome
yes,
when people are
yes.
exposed to more natural light. And it's just like, that's crazy, right? So you're telling me the composition of my gut bacteria changes if I get more sun versus less. That's it's kind of crazy to me. So, but it just goes to the bottom line is, we really should make an effort to spend as much time outside as we can, generally speaking, because we're spending way too much time indoors. And there's all these downstream benefits that we're still, that all of these studies are showing, but that it's intuitive to us. We know that the sun is very important for health, and that bright light is very important for health. So just spending time outside makes a lot of sense. And one hack that I like to give too, because a lot of folks are concerned about sunlight and photo aging of the skin, which is a legitimate concern. And if you spend a lot of time outside, the UV light can prematurely break down the skin and wrinkles and fine lines, and nobody wants that. Everyone wants to look and feel young, right? So there's a couple things. One is there's this old rule of thumb: spend time outside when your shadow is longer than you. Yeah, and it's an old rule of thumb that we forget, but the reason why it was a rule of thumb is because there's essentially no UV light, so your skin is just much better off, but you're getting plenty of that infrared. Another hack is if it is midday, I do think moderate amounts of UV light are important. So you should get 10 or 15 minutes, in my opinion, midday for the vitamin D. But beyond that, you can be outside, but be in a green space. And it's really fascinating because green reflects near infrared. And I've done this test myself. So, I have a near infrared light meter and I would point it up at the sun and it might measure 40 milliwatts. But then I would sit in my patio next to the green grass and I point the meter down at the green grass and it measures 8 to 10 milliwatts. That's coming up off the grass and that's hitting the body, right? So you can get near infrared exposure indirectly and you don't have to worry about the photo aging of the skin. It's kind of my point, but you just need to be in a green space.
Yes, and sitting in the shade, same thing. Like you can get a ton of
Yep.
benefits from sitting in the shade, from the reflection. And I always tell people too, like if you're worried about burning at midday, like don't spend a lot of time midday, but make sure you're getting out in the morning so that you're getting the UVA rise that helps to prime you for that more intense UVB coming later in the day for sure.
That's
Before,
exactly right. That's
yeah.
exactly right. So, and that's one point. One of the reasons why we have problems with UV light is because we're not getting out in the morning and we're not getting that priming. Because
Mhm.
nature has designed us. There's actually this idea of the preconditioning of the skin with red and near infrared light early morning, so that you're ready for that UVB. And there are studies showing, and one of the studies that I love, it's a preprint, wasn't published, but the scientists referred to near infrared light exposure as SPF 15. It actually protected the skin from sunburn. And so again, I mean, again, we're designed by nature to be out early in the morning. And then generally speaking, if you look at like the Hudson tribe at noon, they would generally like just go and sit in the shade, kind of obvious because it's too hot. But to the extent that they were getting UV, their skin is primed and protected because they got a couple of hours of near infrared in the early morning.
Yeah. And even though I live in Wisconsin, I have not burned in years and years because I'm very careful I haven't used sunscreen. I know the people that is a trigger for a lot of people whenever I post that I haven't worn sunscreen, they're all expired. I threw them all away. They're like, oh, what? I'm like,
Well, you're such a good advocate for that because you have beautiful skin and you shared your age, so it's amazing. So it goes to show you can have beautiful skin without sunscreen. It is possible, and I think just being common sense. I wear a hat. If I know I'm going to be out and protect my face, because let's face it, your face does take the brunt of it. But just some common sense and just limiting the exposure and not burning, is really all it takes.
right. Yeah. Move to the shade if you feel like. that you're starting to burn, and like put clothing on or move to the shade. But as we close out, I would like to ask you about a couple of other sources or resources of products that I saw that you have that I was curious about, and one being green light therapy. I haven't seen that before, but I saw that that was available. Like, what are we using that for? Tell me more about it.
So it's really cool. So one of the things that I'm super excited about, and I feel super blessed as the company's grown, and the research is just incredible. You know, when I started, we have a database on our site, and we started in 2019, there were 4,500 studies of photobiomodulation, and now that database is just 6 years later is up to almost 8,000 studies. So just the pace, I know the world has a lot of problems, and we can get caught in kind of social media doom loops. But there's also a lot of really cool things happening, and a lot of like research is being done, and the pace of human knowledge is really accelerating. And so and the reason I mentioned that is there were a couple of really interesting studies on narrow band green light, one done at Harvard, one done at University of Arizona, and it's really fascinating because narrow band green light, you can really only create that from LEDs. It doesn't exist in nature, so it's abnormal. Like you would never be exposed to just this narrow band 520 nanometer green light anywhere in nature, really. But when people are exposed to it, it seems to do something, and with the signaling and the pain signaling in the brain, and people that have migraines often get relief. And it actually, it's really interesting. So they get relief kind of in two ways. So our device is designed to be used kind of in an acute way. So if you have a migraine, you turn on the green light, close your eyes, just shine it through your light, and hopefully it takes the edge off and reduces the pain. But there were also studies that showed 2 hours a day of just kind of ambient exposure to green light reduced the frequency of migraines. So if you're a person that struggles with migraines, and these lights, again, these LEDs we're actually selling a lamp on Amazon for $50 where you could just have it as a desk lamp. And if you have struggled with migraines, hopefully it will reduce the frequency of them. But we have the device that we sell on our site is actually, it's also a red and near infrared light device because I built it into one. So you get the benefits of red and near infrared on a regular basis. But if you happen to have a migraine, you can put on the green mode and try to use it, through your closed eyes to take the edge off.
Interesting. That's the first I've heard. I'm like, what is green light therapy? I've never seen that before.
It's crazy. And I was super skeptical. I don't get migraines, but I actually got a migraine a couple of years ago and I happened to have the prototype and I couldn't believe it, but it helped. And then we've just gotten a lot of anecdotal feedback of people saying, yes, it helps. And I'm just like, I guess, we have to try to figure this out and bring it to market because it really seems to actually work. It's crazy. Um, but it's very super fascinating because again, like it's you could not be exposed to that nature, and there's just something going on with the signaling in the brain, and any other part of the spectrum makes migraines worse. And they've tested this, right? Which kind of makes sense. Usually, you don't want any light. Usually people that have migraines they go into a dark room and they wait it out. But something about this narrowband green seems to hijack the signaling in the brain and tone it down.
Interesting. Yeah, thankfully I do not struggle with migraines. I very, very rarely get a headache, but yeah, that so it's specifically for that. Yes. Okay. All right. Well, anything else that we didn't talk about that you would love my listeners to know about that we didn't touch on? Oh, I there is one more question actually. Is there any harm? Like, is there anything that we should know about? Like, can we overdo this? Can we overdo this therapy? Is there anything you want people to know about there?
So there is so we recommend using it around, for regular maintenance, as I say, 10 minutes or so a day, 4 to 6 times a week. There is you can think of it like exercise. It is a hormetic stressor.
Mhm.
So, I think just about everybody can benefit by going on a 15 or 20-minute walk every single day, right? But that doesn't mean that, and because that's moderate exercise that they're day. But, running a marathon every day, probably not a good idea, right? And so it's the same thing with the exposure from these lights. It is a hormetic stressor. You're kind of looking for the Goldilocks amount. And there also is this idea of like some of the studies, they show the benefits lasting more than 24 hours, which is really interesting, right? So the way I've kind of thought about this and why we started recommending taking a day off a week is that let's say if you think about the benefit as like a curve, you get benefit and then it drops off over time. But after 24 hours, you're not back to baseline, and then you use it again. Eventually, you're going to hit some sort of inhibitory zone.
Yeah.
right? And so take a day off, get back to baseline, and then start over. It was kind of my thought process on that. And having said that, realistically, for most people, because we are so deficient, my intuitively, it seems like it was going to take a lot to get to the inhibitory zone. But again, just in our 6 years of business, 10 minutes on a regular basis, 10 minutes a day on a regular basis seems to be pretty good for most people. And so I would say that and strategically take a day off, once a week and you're good.
Okay. Okay. Good to know. Well, thank you for coming on today. Where can we find your devices and more about Mito Light?
So you can go to our website, mitoredlight.com. If you want to learn more, we have a learn page where we kind of distill down in simple terms some of the things we talked about. And then we do have a blog too. So on the learn page, you can go read our blog, and we've got a lot of in-depth articles talking about photobiomodulation. If you have any specific thing you want to learn about, or you can give us a call. I mean, send us an email, info@mitoredlight.com. We do have phone support here in Arizona. You can talk to an actual live person in the US if you have questions. So just give us a call, and we're happy to help.
Awesome. Well, we'll link everything in the show notes, and there is a code down there for a discount for through my link. And if you don't have my link, you can use my code, and that will get you a discount as well. But thanks so much for coming on today and teaching us all about red light therapy. You're very knowledgeable, and we love the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much.